I mean, it's really hard to know where to start with that. The idea that you're saying we are going to expel 1.8 million people from their homeland. We are going to compel the Egyptians and the Jordanians to take them. Both countries have strongly rejected that. It's kind of an existential position for certainly for Jordan, and probably the Egyptians feel the same way. They don't want Palestinians living in their countries. They think that destabilizes their countries. The idea that the U.S. would just seize the land and redevelop it as a real estate project with the help of the U.S. military. I mean, all of it is kind of mind-boggling. But, John, I think there's a bigger thing. Given everything that's going on in Washington in these first 2 weeks, I've said for 8 years, the thing that concerns me is beyond policy. Donald Trump doesn't believe in rules and laws and norms or institutions. He doesn't believe them domestically. He doesn't believe in them internationally. And he has defied them to get to this point and back to the presidency. And I think he feels indomitable. And his attitude is, we'll take what we want to take. Well, we'll take Gaza. We'll take Greenland. We'll make Canada a state. We'll take the Panama Canal. This is really a dangerous attitude, just as it's dangerous to say we're going to walk in and take over agencies and dissolve agencies and decide how money is going to be spent regardless of what the Constitution says. There are implications to all of this that are very, very large for peace in the world and large for a functioning democracy here at home.
Beth, is there any actual mechanism for the United States to do this? And how would this region look upon basically a U.S. American island on this territory, which is some of the most contentious on earth?
Well, I always, when people ask me what it was like to brief President Trump, one of the things I always say is that, you have to adjust because he doesn't think like a typical foreign policy establishment person. And I think we just witnessed just a stunningly understatement to say outside the box thinking. So this isn't on anybody's bingo card. I think that any region is probably, if they haven't heard it before from Trump, is like literally their jaws on the ground. There is no mechanism for this. There is no precedent for this. But, as David was just saying, it runs counter to the Muslim street in the region. That's sometimes different than what leaders think. But the leaders in the region are afraid of the Muslim street. And they're afraid that if they somehow support any of this, even Saudi Arabia, that's an autocracy, it could be a problem for them at home. They worried about assassination. They worry about protests. So Jordan, Egypt, but even Saudi Arabia, these kinds of places. And then on the flip side, even the settlers probably aren't excited about this in Israel because that's their land, not America's. So I think that this will not actually materialize as presented today somehow.
John King, what about the Dearborn Street? I mean, where do you see U.S. domestic politics at play here?
Well, there are a lot of Democrats saying, I told you so, to their Muslim friends in Dearborn and in Hamtramck who couldn't vote for President Biden. And some of them voted for President Trump. Some of them stayed home. So there will be a domestic political fallout here. But, John, I think this is just much bigger than that. You have a president of the United States saying he will forcibly resettle people who live on land the international community says is theirs. It's a violation of international law. It's a favor to his friend Benjamin Netanyahu, but it runs counter to American policy. You showed George W. Bush and Joe Biden and Barack Obama. It goes back before that as well. For an American president who's supposed to be the beacon of democracy to the world, saying, look, it hasn't worked, so I don't think it's your land anymore. Sorry, you got to go, and I'm going to take it over. I have a few already from some European ambassadors saying, what? They don't think this is going to happen. They're trying to figure out what the end game is. Trump often throws up these incredibly big, blustery things because he has a goal somewhere down here beneath them, and they're trying to sort that out. But if you put it in the context of what you were talking about at the start of the program, we are 2 weeks and 1 day in, and they're dismantling federal agencies. They're firing federal employees. They're trying to do away with things that if the Congress would stand up to him and say, sir, we could talk about this, but actually the Constitution says that's our job. This is a presidential power grab and a view of presidential power, and now a view of American power, to David's point about Greenland, the Panama Canal. What's next? What's next? If he doesn't like the management of some country in Africa, if a red state doesn't like the blue state next door, there are rules and norms and laws for a reason. You can challenge them, but for a president of the United States to unilaterally say we can take land that belongs to somebody else is beyond astounding.
The issues at play are so big here. I realize it feels like we're moving quickly, but there's just so many different aspects of this going on. Aaron, I want to play something else from this news conference. Listen to this.
Given what you've said about Gaza, did the U.S. send troops to help secure the security vacuum?
As far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that.
So that's not ruling out, Aaron, using U.S. troops in Gaza. This is a president who, for many years, opposed U.S. intervention in Iraq and wanted to pull troops out of Afghanistan. Now he wants to deploy potentially to Gaza?
I wouldn't necessarily say that he wants to deploy, but this is a very typical tactic of President Trump, which is to say, I'm not taking anything off the table with whatever the topic is, and certainly when it comes to geopolitics. Yes, it's very clear that Hamas is running Gaza as of this point, and that remains a threat to the sovereignty of Israel. And with Bibi Netanyahu standing there, Donald Trump was doing everything to show our greatest ally in the Middle East that he wants to have their back and provide security. This is something I hadn't heard of before, the idea of the United States unilaterally taking over Gaza. I think we are very far from any actual movement on any of this. But the main part of this being Israeli sovereignty, I think, is one of the biggest keys here for Donald Trump. And with Hamas in Gaza, that is a very close terrorist organization that can launch attacks into Israel at any moment. And we have seen how deadly Hamas can be to the Israeli population.
All right, stick around, everyone. A lot more to discuss on this. We have a live report from Israel as the country and the region react to tonight's sweeping announcement from the President of the United States, who again says he wants the United States to take a long-term ownership position in Gaza. And later, what a top Democratic senator makes of all of this.